Teaching is hard, and oftentimes it isn't what happens in the classroom that makes the job difficult. It's what happens before and after school, during passing periods, at lunch, in meetings, or in our lives outside of school that challenges our ability to stick with the profession. TeacherGuard is committed to focusing on making teaching sustainable and enjoyable. We want to make the rewards of the profession seem more attainable and the challenges more bearable. Our mentorship model pairs teachers with consistent daily support from a peer educator. Through TeacherGuard's four sustainability principles, we will walk the challenging times with you and allow you to enjoy the wins and celebrations that come with this beautiful profession. See teacherguard.net for more information and to explore how you can join our community of educators today. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and really excited for our guest. Joining us today is Jeff Lampert. How are you doing, Jeff?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Doing great. Let's start off by just having you introduce yourself a little bit. What do you do? How long have you been doing it for? And anything else you'd like to share about the podcast, about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm in my seventh year teaching. I teach in Encinitas, California at San Diego Academy. I teach high school chemistry. I have experience working in one other district that was down in Chula Vista, right near the border in San Diego.
Awesome. Cool. So you got some experience under your belt, still kind of relatively new to the profession. But I think it's funny because you hit that 4 or 5 year mark and you're already considered a veteran teacher at times.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. But hearing that you've been in the profession for a while now, as you think about your first few years teaching, and then think about maybe some of the folks that you work with that are entering the profession now, what would you say are one or two factors that you feel contribute to or contribute against teacher sustainability?
Yeah, so I think like the first one is surrounding like burnout. Everyone talks about it, but also no one talks about it. It's something that everyone says, like teachers burn out by your fifth year, only 33% continue on, like whatever the stats are for that most recent time period. Um, but then there's no one saying, and here's what to do about it. My teacher prep program, I think we had like half a lesson where we kind of talked about a couple different things, but nothing that was concrete of like, if you're feeling burnout, here's some strategies, here's like kind of how you can proceed. And then the other is a little bit more structural. And it's just that the teaching job is difficult. It's hard. There's so many different variables on a daily basis that we have to uh, deal with. And some of those are under our control and some aren't. And for me, at least, the ones that aren't under my control are the ones that I think cause me the most issues. Like when I'm trying to like fix them, when I can't make a change, but I feel like I have to do it. That's when it's the hardest.
I'm really curious about the way you phrase that first point, the idea of everybody talks about it, but no one talks about it. Can you just expand on what you mean by that when it comes to teacher burnout?
Yeah, so I think that term burnout gets thrown around a lot. Like people will say like, "Oh yeah, I'm like burnout right now. Like I'm just run down. It's March and we all know how March feels." Um and it's almost like it's the same to me as the question of like how are you doing? Like you kind of have to answer I'm fine. And so there's in teaching like, "Oh yeah, I'm burnt out." Like what are you doing about it? What do you actually mean by burnt out? Is it because you're working too much? Is it a issue like you don't like what you're doing? At the moment, like, what's the actual problem? And so I think the talking about it a little bit almost stunts the conversation and prevents it from going further, um, and really diving into some of those issues that would let people process and understand what's going on a little bit better.
So it's almost like like a courtesy conversation, kind of
Yeah.
like that, in the same way that we greet others, hoping that they're not saying, "Oh, I'm doing poorly. Can we talk about it?" Because I didn't factor that much time into me interacting with you right now. Something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and one example that, someone at a meeting I was at last summer mentioned was, they said that they were going into their first year ever teaching, and every time they told someone, everyone said, "Oh my god, it's gonna be so hard," but then didn't, like, give them a strategy, and they were complaining of, like, how, intimidating that was, and how much they really just want someone to say, like, "Well, it'll be okay. Here's one thing that you can do that'll help you feel better," and there wasn't even that. It was just like, "Oh, it's gonna be hard. Have fun."
Where do you think that comes from? Is it because people are it's almost like they black out or they try to block out what happened during that first year teaching, and as a result you remember the hardship, but you don't necessarily think about, I want to relive it and think about what could I have done differently, what could I have asked for during that first year that might have made it easier. Or is it just kind of like a rite of passage kind of thing that your first year has to be difficult and we're not going to tell you how to get over that?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's some of both. Like, I think what they're saying isn't wrong. Your first year is gonna be really hard. Um, and if I'm giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, I think they're trying to provide some camaraderie and say like, "Hey, it's hard, and we've all been there, and it's almost like it's gonna be okay." And what the person asked for though was like, everybody has one small strategy that they picked up over 2, 3, 4 years teaching. Like, you could just give me one small thing and say, it's going to be hard, but here's this thing. And it's almost just I think people assume that because they had to, they will pick up these new strategies. But why make them pick it up? Help them along the road. Just give them that small little thing to make it easier for that first year.
Do you think if, let's say it changed, let's say somebody walks into day one having already had a conversation with somebody else about like, these are all the 10 things that I think you should look out for, that you may run into, and here's how to deal with them. Do you think that that would be helpful to you as a first year teacher? Or is that one of those things where like, conceptually, I understand what you're telling me, but until I face that actual issue in the classroom, it won't really hit the same, or even though you've like prepped me for it, I still need to experience the challenge in order to overcome it.
I think both are true. And for me, I think the difference is if I had had someone tell me, like, here's one thing you can try in that first year, I would feel more comfortable approaching them if I like tried that and it went well, or if I tried it and it didn't. It would just open up that conversation for me to come in and say, whereas like no one wants to go into the conversation and say, like, oh yeah, you were right. My first year does suck. But if you can come in and say, like, oh yeah, I tried that thing and like it kind of worked, but did I do it right? You're still saying it kind of sucks right now, but it's an easier way to get into that conversation and start improving and working on those skills.
And why is it, do you think, that that first year does suck? That first year is challenging? Because I'm trying to think of one teacher who I've run into who can maybe say like, my first year was amazing. I had no problems. I don't think I've ever run into somebody that says it. Why is it so challenging?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to like my very vague ethereal second reason for why sustainability is hard, and that's that I have 40 kids in my chemistry classroom with 10 lit Bunsen burners at a time, and I also have to make new not make new curriculum, but find what I'm doing the next day. Um, I was trying to explain to my dad one time about what being a teacher is like, and I said that, you know, you had to make a 1 hour presentation sales pitch and you took a week to do it. I do 5 of those a week, or sometimes 10 if I'm teaching 2 classes at the same time, and that's what teaching is on a daily basis. And so, yeah, by my 3rd year, I'm using the same presentation I did. But that first year, it's a lot to manage just for the logistics, let alone managing 40, 15-year-olds too.
Yeah, I mean, and having never done that before, right? Walking into a situation where you may have interacted with kids, children in the past, you may
Mhm.
have not, right? Like we're walking
Yeah,
out of getting our credential after interacting with purely adults pretty much for the past 4 or 5 years, however long it took to get our degrees and our credential. And now you're tossed in a building with teenagers.
yeah,
And your task is to make them care about something that they don't naturally care about repeatedly, day after day. Not just care about it enough to learn it, to do
right.
difficult things and overcome them in a limited amount of time for a large volume of human beings over and over again. It's the most, if you lay it out like that, it's almost
Yeah,
like I think of football and like a running back's job, right? If you were to write down the job description of like take this ball, run in between that mass of hundreds and hundreds of pounds of men, get to the other side, try to not get knocked down, and do it over and over again. This sounds
Mhm.
ridiculous.
Yep.
But that is essentially what teaching is.
Yeah.
And what do you think is something, or can be more than one thing, that a teacher runs into maybe at the end of the first year that makes them say, "Yeah, I'm coming back. I'll come back next year and sign up for this again." Uh,
Yeah. For me, it's the kids. I don't know what, like, one part of that is, but whether it's, like, the kid who struggled all year, but, like, at the end of the year, just managed to, like, it finally clicked, the kid got it. That's always a great experience. Sometimes it's just, like, a conversation where, like, it was 5 minutes in class ended early, and, like, the kids ask you about supernovas, and you have to dive really deep into this cool thing. They're super interested in it. It's not content based, it's not rigorous, it's just fun. Um, and so getting to enjoy those, like, small little moments, um, and looking forward to more of those, I think is what really kinda keeps you coming back.
do you think that that could be, because that sounds like a beautiful thing, right? Like you keep coming back for the kids, which is why we signed up for doing what we're doing. Do you think that could also be counterproductive in a sense? Because I've run into folks who have stayed in an environment that maybe was not a great one at a particular school, but it was the kids that brought them back, you know? Like everything about the year was unsupportive. I don't have a community. My administration isn't great, but my homeroom kids were awesome and I
Yeah.
get to see them next year as juniors or as seniors and I want to come back for them. And in May and June, that sounds like a great idea. And in October, November, you're rethinking everything again, right? So can it work both ways?
I think so, and one thing that, like, I mentioned that one lesson that I had in my teacher prep program, and it covered, they called it the martyr teacher myth, that in order to be a good teacher, you kinda have to, like, martyr your own needs in order to support your students in the best way. And that example you gave, like, really reminded me of that teacher. They're like, "It sucked, but these kids, like, I can give myself up for them." Um, and I actually, I kinda talked about how I didn't learn about it, but that was one thing that I had keep in my mind a lot in my first year teaching of, like, am I martyring? Am I putting down my own needs in favor of others? And if I was, I really tried to step back and try and figure out, can I meet both my needs and theirs in some way? Um, and spend time thinking about what the best ways to fulfill that were, um, to make sure that I could stay in it for the long term, not just for that one group of kids.
What brings you that self-awareness? Because I think that that martyrdom, whatever we want to call it, is prevalent in a lot of teachers. And while that may get you through 1 or 2 more years in the profession, I do think without being self-aware that that is happening, that's what eventually drives us out of it, out of the career. So is that something that comes natural to you to just kind of be self-aware about that, or have you had to actively work towards checking yourself whenever you feel like, am I staying in this for the right reasons, or am I kind of
Yeah.
victimizing myself a bit here?
So for me, it would start showing up in, like, indirect ways. And so I'd start to notice that I would feel this, like, resentment towards the kids or towards my job or whatever it was. And when I started, like, eventually I'd realize, like, oh yeah, that's resentment. And then I would start digging into, like, why I had that resentment. Um, and then it, would turn out that, like, oh yeah, I was giving up myself too much. I wasn't setting this boundary that I needed to be setting to prevent myself from resenting it. For me personally, I usually did that either through talking with other teachers, um, or, like, not meditative thought, but just, like, sitting with it without something else for a minute. And that was able to, like, let me process through what I needed to figure out, like, where my barriers were.
So it's a deep thought, right? And it's
Yeah.
time dedicated to doing that. And for teachers, regardless of what year you're in into the profession, time allotted for that deep thought is something that I also have heard many folks echo as a, you don't have time to reflect, right? You're teaching all your class periods, and next thing you know, the days, the weeks, the months have gone by. If you don't have a long commute home, if you get home and you have family, there's no transition period during which you're thinking about, let me think about why I feel the way I feel about the profession and how the accumulation of all these days and all these feelings could ultimately lead me to make a decision that I may seem impulsive. But really, there was nothing impulsive about it. It was the accumulation of little moments of not being able to reflect. So, is that something that you feel could also drive someone out of the field?
Yeah, and so like I mean, when I think of like what helped, I think like my third or maybe my fourth year teaching were some of like the worst burnout. And the two things that I think about as far as helping were reading a book about burnout by Jess Cleaves. And like, reading a book makes you sit for hours and hours to like really think and process through. And that book also had some like worksheet activities built in where it asks you to like do some reflection, do some thinking in a structured way.
What
And
was
the
the book,
other thing
Jeff?
that helped was through a fellowship that I was in, I was able to get some funding to have teacher sustainability coaching. Um, and it was through an organization in Michigan, and we pre-planned out 11 or 10 meetings throughout the year, so once per month. Um, and I had to set aside that half hour to an hour to talk with my coach and really reflect on how I was doing. Um, and when I first started, I was skeptical of how much it would matter. Um, and just taking that time to slow down, to take that 30 minutes to see my coach and have to say either it's going great or it really sucks right now. It helped a lot just to be forced to sit with it.
I have a point to bring up about that, but I didn't want to forget to ask you, can you repeat the name of that book that you mentioned?
Yeah,
Uh,
so that was or sorry, it's called Planning to Stay by Jess Cleaves.
in a stay.
And the main topics it covers are burnout, demoralization, and exploitation. So splitting this big monstrosity of burnout into three explicit parts that each can be targeted in their own separate ways.
Got it. And then to your second point about carving out that time, I'm curious, knowing that you've gone through this sustainability coaching. Um, while you have some background on what Teacher Guard does, I purposefully try to not flesh out the entire program with folks who joined the podcast before because I want to get a genuine reaction when I talk about some of these components. So I'm curious what you think about the way that we structure mentorship. Uh, Focuses on this thing called dynamic journaling. And so the idea is you have a peer mentor somewhere, another teacher that's going through what you're going through, or similar things. And you do have weekly sessions where you're meeting with them for 30 minutes or so. However, what I think is the greatest value to this program is that what the mentor is also committing to doing is you have a shared Google Doc with them and everybody's commit or the mentee is committing to at the end of my day, if something is on my mind, even if it's for 2 minutes, I'm going to type it into this document. I can do it on my phone, I can do it on my laptop. What the mentor then commits to is going in by the end of the night or by before the next morning and responding. What that does is continue the conversation that starts during a weekly check-in throughout the entire week. My pet peeve with professional development that focused on coaching was that I think once a month, even once a week, it's great. But what happens if I meet with you on a Monday, something happens on a Tuesday, and now I'm not talking to you again for 6 days? My mind can go in many different directions over the course of the 6 days without having someone to bounce ideas off of. So the heart of this program is really what you're talking about right now. The idea of intentionally carving out time to take whatever's on your mind that without addressing it will eventually burn you out, for lack of a better way. Uh, and just putting it somewhere, putting it in a piece of paper, putting it in a document, and then getting some feedback from it. What are your thoughts on how that kind of structure could fit into the support that some new and veteran teachers need?
Yeah, so I think that the benefit to that is like even with a coach, it was easy sometimes to say like it's going great. And
Mm-hmm.
there's almost this like not praise that I would get for it, but like I'm glad to hear that. Like I wanted to be in a good mood, and so if I said it, then it would be true. I think that daily practice of just talking about whatever came up, um, it gives a lot of real time data to think about, oh yeah, was my day actually that good? Was there something that I want to talk about? Was there something I want to bring up now that I won't think about with my rose colored glasses when I talk about the coach? And then on the opposite side, I think there's also a person who, I don't know what the opposite of a rose colored glasses is, but is looking at it through the very pessimistic lens and says, God, my every day sucks. But hopefully in that journaling, you'd also be raising up this idea of like, I did have that great conversation with the kid. The kid did get it today. And so by reflecting on it on a daily basis, not just when it's good or when it's bad, would help to even out and be able to provide that solid reflection of what that daily teaching is like and where it needs to change or where it's going well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, especially if things aren't going great, right? I think we are going to release that anxiety that we fear or that frustration or that anger one way or another. So whether that is me writing it down and getting feedback, hopefully from somebody, or me taking it out in a moment of anger with my family, or taking it out with a colleague or with a friend, or ignoring someone, or whatever, it's going to come out. And I think it is crucial for teacher sustainability that whatever the form may be, whether it's not mentorship, maybe it's the gym, maybe it's some other way in which we get that out of us, but there is a time for reflection, right? I think of video games. I did a lot of my reflection playing video games, not because I was paying attention to the video game, but because it
Yeah.
was enough to like get my mind off of everything and then let my thoughts kind of flow. And some of my most brilliant ideas came up when I was playing NBA 2K, right? Because I
Yeah.
wasn't really
Yeah.
focusing on the game. My mind was percolating, thinking about everything that happened. And so again, regardless of the format, I think if there's a takeaway message for teachers who feel like they are struggling or on the verge of burnout, is you got to find something. Would you agree with that? Anything, any kind of way that you can reflect, I suppose.
Yeah. And this is where I struggle the most when others will ask me for advice or if I get asked like, how do you do it? Because it's such a personal thing. Um, the one way that I have found that I really like to like suggest it for people is thinking about the difference between a coping strategy and a caring strategy. This I'm pulling directly from Jess Cleaves again, her book.
Hmm.
But a coping strategy is something where like it helps you feel better in the moment. And it's the like I think the prime example is like doom scrolling, right? You just go on social media, you scroll, you don't feel anything for an hour, but you don't necessarily feel better after. Um, and then letting people identify their own caring mechanisms, which is where you then feel better after you do it. So for you, it's NBA 2K. You played, and for some people, that would just be coping. They don't feel better after, but you use it as a reflective time. For me, it's running. Like I get to go outside and not think about anything while also thinking about everything
Yeah.
for however long I run. And so the advice of trying to give a personal, like find your caring strategy, whatever that may be, um, to think about it, I think would help teachers level out a bit. And like you said, not snap at their family, snap at their students, whoever it is, to get it out instead.
Yeah. I can't remember where I was reading this earlier this week. Something along the lines of now more than ever, we are so uh, used to hearing some kind of noise all the time that it's almost like we've grown afraid of what if I just don't hear anything, right? What if I can just wash the dishes without having the TV or a podcast
Yep.
on or YouTube or something like that? Um, because that is our brains are incredible and our brains will find ways of entertaining themselves, even if it is by reflecting on things that have already happened. And for good or bad, I don't think we give ourselves that space. I know, speaking for a fact, that like if I am taking the trash out and I'm not listening to a podcast, I feel like I wasted time. You know, like this was a menial task and I could have been learning something or hearing something for entertainment and I didn't. And so thinking about you and running and going out, and I'm sure you're listening to something while you're doing it, or maybe you're not, but what are your thoughts on that idea of getting ourselves away from noise whenever possible to let our brains just run wild.
Yeah, so it's something that I've developed some, and I'm still not great at. But before I run, I try and think, if I'm going to listen to something, why am I listening to it? And so I almost always listen to something, but if I'm listening to a podcast, I'm not using, like, I'm processing something external, but I'm not doing any internal work while I do that. Whereas if I'm listening to like softer music or something that like doesn't distract me, I'm able to do that internal processing that I would need to do. And so again, still in practice, oftentimes I just throw on a comedy podcast or whatever to get through the run. But when I can, like, sometimes I know I've had a day and I just do need to run in not silence, but calm thinking space rather than an external processing.
Yeah, it is, it's really weird, but I almost it feels super odd to say it, but there's times when I'm like, I'm trying my best to just sit and not think of anything. So sometimes I'll just sit
Mm,
down, there's nothing on the TV, there's nothing in my ears, but I'm also not thinking about anything. I'm just like sitting there and drinking my coffee or doing whatever I can. And I think to someone who is seen watching me do that, I probably look like the weirdest person ever, especially if they were to ask, like, "What are you doing right now?" To just say nothing. But there's such value to that because it really is not nothing. Your brain will think of things.
yeah.
And again, that idea of slowing down for teachers, circling back to the challenges that they face, is just so crucial in those early years because I think some of the folks that stick around long term, going back to your idea of coping, they've just learned to cope with some of these challenges, right? And now I'm in it 10 years. The benefits, the retirement benefits of this profession are fine. I'm just going to get through it because I've sunk so much time into the career. But then that's when you get innovation is now thrown out the door, right? Trying new things and doing, changing with the times. That's gone out the door because instead of solving some of the challenges early in our career, we've learned to cope with them. And now we're just gonna go through the motions for however long we remain in teaching, and that I wonder if it's almost worse than if somebody were to just leave the profession. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So this was, I wonder how many times I can name drop the book, but her first statement in it was like, "You're allowed to leave. You're not stuck. There's a world outside teaching for you." And I think that's an important point to recognize. Like, if you hate the job, you don't have to. There are alternatives out there for you, and if you don't want to be there, you can leave. Not for anyone else, but yourself. And that's not hurting kids. That's not like disrespecting your coworkers. Like, that's just you being a human being. Um, and so once you do decide to stay in the profession, now that it's an active choice that you are staying, it's now on you a little bit to say, well, if I am going to be here, I do have to do my job and work with kids and do these other things. But yeah, if you are staying in when it's really not the best for you, it's also not the best for anyone else, really. Like, maybe you can get through it, but are you really being your best self in that situation? It's hard to be when you really don't enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I first, um, ideated Teacher Guard, I thought a lot about promoting, this will help teacher retention, right? And thinking of, like, what administrators would wanna see in a program, that they could offer their teachers. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, that's not the angle here because it isn't about always keeping the teacher in the profession. It's about making sure that the teacher and the profession still align, that there's still love there, that there's still a desire to want to do the craft. And then the key word that came to mind is sustainability. Once you have all those elements, once the teaching and the person are a match, how do we make it sustainable so that you are able to do it for a long time, you're able to do it well, and you're able to impact as many kids as possible? And, we're in a period right now where a lot of folks are leaving the profession, and it's considered a crisis. And as much as that is true, I also see it as an opportunity because if folks are leaving the profession, while there are probably some really great teachers that are stepping out the door, There's also folks that are probably going to be great at other things, and that's okay too. And I think it'll encourage the folks that stick around to be their best and to continue developing to be their best for students, because the challenges and the opportunities that were present when you first started teaching half a decade ago are similar to some extent, but even in that short amount of time, teachers are in a different world right now than they were in 2019, 2020. Um, so all that to say, sustainability, I think, is the key word, not just retention. And I think you spoke to it in your original point, going back to that book. You are allowed to leave and it's okay. But I would add a caveat there of let's talk first, right? Let's figure out, you know, why we are leaving, and if it's because of a momentary feeling or if it's because it is truly the right decision. So having said all that, I like to wrap up these episodes by asking the folks who are joining me, Jeff, let's say that you were in a room with a first year teacher. We're in end of the school year right now, April, May time, and they are telling you this isn't for me. I'm not sure that I'm going to come back next year, thinking about changing my path here. What are one or two sentences that you would share with that teacher from a sustainability standpoint, not necessarily from a retention standpoint?
Yeah, for sustainability, if questions count as sentences, then I would be asking if the problems that they're facing are with the job or with their location. So is it something that if you had different admin, a different uh, group of teachers working with you, would these problems be solved? And if so, then there's other options, right? Moving schools is a great option if it's just a school problem. At the same time, if you're just like, yeah, I don't enjoy working with kids, you're like, yep, you'll do great doing something else. Like that's okay.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's spot on, right? The spirit needs to be there, the desire needs to be there, and then if those two things are there, I think all other things are fixable. It's just a matter of summing up everything we spoke about, reflecting, carving out the time for yourself, and putting yourself as a priority, honestly, at times, so that you can be the best you can to serve those who you want to serve every day. Jeff, really thankful for the time that you gave me here today. Appreciate it. Thanks for all the good work you're doing in the classroom as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great to get to talk through some of these things. It was fun.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it and found it helpful to your teaching journey, please don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube or through your favorite podcast platform. We also appreciate any and all reviews or comments you leave. Thank you for joining us today, and tune in next week for our next episode.